Lennox and Finn were friends living in the same college dorm. One day, Lennox reported that something had happened to his friend. He said Finn hadn't left his room all day. He also never responded to any of Lennox's texts. In the evening, Lennox started to worry and knocked on Finn's door, but the guy didn't answer. Lennox peeked through the keyhole and saw that his friend was lying on the floor, so he called the police. After that, Lennox got arrested. Why? Lennox has a bandage on his right eye, but the keyhole is located in such a way that it's only possible to look inside with the right eye. It means the guy couldn't do it. He simply knew what had happened. Mrs. Rivers reported that someone had broken into her house. They stole all the money and jewelry she kept in her living room. Detective Callum arrived to investigate the crime. The room was a mess. It was obvious that someone had been looking for something there. But in the end, the detective concluded that there was no robbery. Mrs. Rivers made the whole thing up. Why did he decide so? Look at this very expensive and fragile tea set lying on the floor. If a criminal had really been there, he wouldn't have cared about the set. It would be smashed after falling down. It seems that when Mrs. Rivers was staging a robbery, she didn't feel like breaking her expensive tea set. Viviana and Malcolm were working outside. Malcolm was repairing the roof, and Viviana was working in the garden. Suddenly, a hammer fell from the roof and hit Viviana on the head. She was taken to a hospital, and the police came to figure out what had happened. When Malcolm told them everything, the police arrested him for staging an accident. Why didn't they believe the guy? Viviana was working right next to the house. She was sitting under the roof. If the hammer had fallen accidentally, it would have slid down the roof and fallen behind the woman's back. It could hit her only if someone threw it at her on purpose. Well, that's not nice. Mrs. Cabell is the owner of a small company producing expensive designer cups. On Friday, when the working week was finally over, she got a call from her bank. The woman found out that someone had stolen all the money she had saved. Mrs. Cabell realized it must have been one of her workers, so she asked each of them what they had been doing that day. Sloan, a sales manager, said she had been talking to their clients and looking for new ones. Atticus, a potter, said he always made 1 cup a day, and he showed all the cups he had done that week. Sierra, a designer, said she had been working, but she also admitted she hadn't been really productive that day because of some family issues. Who lied? Atticus. There are 5 working days in a regular week. The man said he made 1 mug a day, but he only showed 4 mugs. It means he missed 1 day of work. 2 weeks ago, a bank was robbed, but the robber hadn't been found yet. A phone call woke Detective Callum up in the middle of the night. His colleague reported that a farmer had found the money. When the detective arrived, he questioned the farmer. The man said, "I argued with my wife and went outside. That's when I found a bag with money in a cornfield." Detective Callum asked if the farmer had noticed anything suspicious before. The farmer replied, "About 2 weeks ago, before going to bed, I looked out of the window. I saw a man walking through the field. It was a full moon and I could clearly see his silhouette. But there wasn't enough light to notice more details about him." The farmer was arrested. Why? The farmer said it had been a full moon 2 weeks before, but it's impossible. As you see, it's a full moon now. The farmer is lying, but why? Esme was having a walk in the forest and got lost. For about the 20th time. Hey, don't ask. Anyway, she found the witch's house, walked in, said hi, petted the cat, and asked the witch to show her the way home. But the witch had a problem. She was learning a new spell and accidentally did something strange to her chairs. On the bright side, she now had a riddle for Esme to solve. The witch had 20 chairs. Now, some of the chairs only had 2 legs, and half of the rest had no legs at all. How many legs did all these 20 chairs have in total? We know that some of the chairs have, on average, 2 legs per chair. The rest of them have either 4 legs or no legs at all. And since half of the rest have no legs and the other half have 4, together they have 2 legs per chair. So there are exactly 40 legs. Ned works in a club. His job is to check people's ID cards and to not let suspicious people or people younger than 21 years old get inside. Take a look at these 3 ID cards and figure out who shouldn't enter the club. The first person is already 21, and nothing else looks suspicious in his ID. The second girl seems alright too. It's written that Brielle was born on September 31st. But such date doesn't exist. Her ID must be fake. Ashley was hurrying to an unplanned business meeting. She asked her boyfriend, Dean, to walk the dog. Dean agreed. But then his friend called and invited him to play a new video game. So the guy decided to skip walking the dog that day and joined his friends. He and Ashley met right outside the house when they both were going back home. Ashley asked what Dean had been doing. The guy said, "I walked the dog and then went to play video games with my friends." Ashley immediately understood he was lying. How did she figure it out? It's winter. Look at the footprints in the snow. There are Ashley's footprints going both ways and Dean's footprints going both ways too. But there are no dog footprints. Evie and Kai were planning to go on a bike tour with their friends. Unfortunately, Evie didn't feel well, so she canceled on her friends and asked Kai to stay with her. Kai was disappointed but agreed. Evie fell asleep. When she woke up, she already felt better. She offered Kai to ride their bikes a bit, just the 2 of them. But when they went outside, Evie realized that while she had been sleeping, Kai had been out with the friends without her. How did she understand it? Look, Evie's bike is all wet. It must have been raining while she was asleep. But Kai's bike is dry. It means that he used it and then wiped it off. Or maybe he wasn't even in the area when it was raining. Tommy was exploring old caves outside the city when he got trapped in a mysterious dungeon. There were 3 ways out, but only one of them was safe. Behind the first door, a fire was raging. Behind the second door, there was acid rain, which could melt any substance within seconds. Behind the third door, there was a huge brown bear that hadn't eaten for 2 years. Which way should Tommy choose? Tommy should choose the third way. No animal can go for 2 years without food and survive. Barely. It was a stormy day, and it had been raining for several hours straight. A car accident happened in a tunnel. The yellow car crashed into the red one. The driver of the yellow car said it had been raining so heavily he hadn't seen anything. So the accident wasn't totally his fault. But the police asked the man to stop lying and claimed it was all his fault. Why? The accident happened in the tunnel. It couldn't be raining there. Mr. Tucker was a businessman. He wanted to find an interesting hobby to impress people. He chose art, even though he knew nothing about it. Still, he kept buying paintings and even owned a couple of famous masterpieces. He liked to invite his potential business partners over to show off his collection. One day, his guest was Miss Geneva Darby, a young lady who owned a jewelry business. As always, Mr. Tucker boasted about his collection, but Miss Darby wasn't impressed. Why? Look closer at this supposedly 16th century painting. There are a couple of cars on the road, but there were no cars at that time, so the painting must be fake. Mrs. McAdams, who was having a day off with her friends, came back home in the middle of the day to change her clothes. There, she found out that her daughter, Eveline, who she'd grounded, wasn't at home. Mrs. McAdams got angry and texted Eveline, asking where she was. Eveline texted her back, saying she was at school. The girl even attached a picture of the classroom. Mrs. McAdams didn't believe her daughter and told her to come home immediately. How did she understand Eveline wasn't at school? Look closely at her cell phone. It's Sunday. There's no school on Sundays.